Okay, so this flip lecture is going to look at the ethological explanations of aggression, and you'll see why this picture in the middle does actually make quite a bit of sense by the end. Now I'm going to warn you, there are lots of acronyms, there's lots of kind of little key terms and things that you need to really make sure you know. So I would really recommend either as you go through this lecture or once you've watched it once to go back through and make a glossary of these terms, because if you get a bit uncertain about them, it's going to be very easy to get confused and not really understand what's happening. Okay. So first off, ethology. Ethology is actually the science of animal behaviour. So this is essentially mostly started by, or popularised I should really say, by people like Konrad Lorenz and Nico Tinbergen in the kind of the 60s and the 70s. They were really interested in kind of animal behaviour and its link to kind of comparatives and psychology. So Lorenz noted that in terms of aggression, the potential for aggression is something that everyone is born with. Everyone is capable of acting aggressively, okay, but not everyone is. So especially in animals, all animals can be aggressive, but there seems to actually to be some kind of trigger, something that happens to them that does trigger them to be aggressive towards something. So something is causing them to be aggressive, whereas they all can be aggressive. And if you're wondering, yes, this is that Lorenz that you heard about in the first year. Him and his geese, I should say. Yeah, this is the same bloke we're talking about. Okay, so he came up with this idea of what we call fixed action patterns. Well, him and Nico Tinbergen did. Okay, so they came up with this idea that all conspecific, so members of the same species, a new key term we need to be aware of. Okay, they all have what we call stereotyped behaviour. So this means they all have kind of behaviour that we can expect of them. They all share these same innate behaviours. So for instance, things like dogs will bark, cats can hiss, gorillas beat their chests, etc, etc, etc. Okay, so all members of the same species have behaviours that we would expect them all to be able to do and all to do at some occasion, hence it being called stereotyped behaviour. Alright, now like I said earlier, there needs to be some kind of environmental stimulus, and this kind of specific conditions, yeah, these don't have to be learnt. Animals are acting aggressively in a stereotypical manner, just like all the other members of their species, in response to the same conditions. And they haven't been taught this by learning it from their parents or anything like that. Even animals raised in isolation, they still react in the same way. And this therefore means that it is innate. They are born with this ability to act in this manner. Okay. So like I say, Nico Tinbergen, he was one who kind of really named these as fixed action patterns. Now in the exam I'd recommend writing this once, then bracketing it as FAP. I've had some time obviously to make this lecture, so I've referred to them as fixed action patterns throughout, and you'll see that it does actually take up quite a lot of time, and for me to say it takes a lot of time as well. So first off, write it in full, then bracket FAP, and just write it as that throughout. Okay. So Lear in 1984 came up with some ideas about what fixed action patterns are. So you kind of really put them down in kind of a set kind of 5 characteristics. Okay, so the first one is that they're stereotyped. As we've already said, all animals will behave in the same way. Yeah, all conspecific animals, so animals of the same species, they'll always behave in that same way. It's a fixed action pattern. Anything that isn't, or is out of the ordinary, we argue isn't a fixed action pattern and is instead some other type of probably learnt behaviour. Okay. Next one is a universal. Yeah, it's the same in all conspecifics, so it's the same in all members of this species. There's no kind of strange outliers or anything like that. It's independent of individual experience. So they don't need to have learnt it. It's regardless of what has actually happened to them, the environment they've been in, what rewards or associations they've made, actually this behaviour, this fixed action pattern is present. Okay. It's also what they call ballistic as well, which means that once it's actually been triggered, once it's been set off, it can't be changed, it can't be stopped. Yeah, once this, let's say the dog has been triggered to react aggressively, to start barking, yeah, they will continue to bark until whatever has happened, or this stimulus has gone away. So if you do own dogs, if you know anyone who does own dogs, obviously this kind of fixed action pattern of behaviour for dogs to bark is often in response to strange people entering their territory. Obviously dogs, pack animal, very territorial. And often what they'll do is they'll bark and bark and bark and bark and bark until someone higher in the pack than them has come and seen this new stranger and decided if they're either friendly or not. Until then, you can't stop it. They will just bark and bark and bark and bark and bark until that stranger leaves. Yeah, it can be really annoying, especially if it's late at night. And the last one is that they are specific triggers. So each fixed action pattern and each species, each conspecific, will have a lot of different fixed action patterns. They each have their own individual and specific trigger. Okay, so you can't have one behavior being triggered by multiple different things. It will be a specific trigger for a specific behavior, and they won't overlap. All right. So we're going to go in a bit more depth in terms of actually the processes by which fixed action patterns occur. And this is where I say a lot of these new acronyms and key terms come in. So please do make some kind of glossary or some kind of notation to yourself to really make sure you do understand this. Because if you forget these, you are going to be really struggling to even get the AO1 in an essay about them. Okay, so a fixed action pattern, this specific behavior, the stereotypical innate behavior, is triggered by a neural mechanism, a biological mechanism called an innate releasing mechanism, an IRM. Okay, these IRMs receive input from our sensory recognition circuits. All right, so all this means is that your kind of your sight, sound, smell, touch, these are all kind of sending signals to your neural mechanisms that are triggering, that are releasing, okay, a fixed action pattern, a behavior that is stereotyped and innate. All right, and this stimulus has its own name. It's called a sign stimulus. This is the trigger. All right, so it can be the presence of a sign stimulus leads to this neural mechanism, this innate releasing mechanism to activate. Okay, and then that obviously, like I say, causes the associated fixed action pattern. All right. Now, it does sound all a bit confusing, so I'm going to do a couple of examples to make it really nice and clear for you. All right. So the first time we're going to look at birds, because why not? All right. So the birds is a small open mouth of their young. Yeah, this is their sign stimulus. There is a kind of a specific stimulus for specific behaviour. They see this little small open mouth just going up and down, opening, blah blah blah, like young birds do. And upon recognising this, upon seeing this, recognising that it is a small and open mouth, yeah, part of its brain will kind of say, oh, I know what this is, and communicate to other parts of its brain to make the bird perform a specific response. Okay, because remember, all of our behaviour eventually goes back to our brain at some point. And this is the innate releasing mechanism. So it's a releasing mechanism, it's a set of things that will happen, yeah. There's something set up in the brain that means it will happen, and it's innate, so they're born with it, and it releases the behaviour. And the response they have is to find food and feed these small open mouths. That's their fixed action pattern. So the sign stimulus, the open mouth of their young, yeah, they see this, they recognise it, their brain automatically, innately kind of sends off a bunch of signals saying you need to go and find some food and put that food in that tiny mouth, yeah, and get something like this. Cheap, bird feeding it, okay? So, another example came a bit later on, and from this image here, the cardinal and the minnows. So the bird there is quite low quality, I apologise, is a cardinal, and the fish are minnows, okay, often quite small fish. And this here is a cardinal feeding minnows. Now, Nico Tinbergen and Lorenz observed this, and they wrote about it in one of their books, and they said that actually this isn't a bird taking pity on the minnows, it isn't one to feel sorry for them, it's not being compassionate, it's not showing empathy or any of these other emotions. This is literally just the ballistic nature of a fixed action pattern. Yeah, something has been triggered and it can't help but do it. Okay, so the sign stimulus they had before, same ones they've always have, it's innate, they can't get rid of it, they're born with it, of the open mouth of the minnows, has led the cardinal to be unable to do anything but feed them. Okay, they actually mention that it's probably most likely that the cardinal has lost its nest. So there's all these different kind of things that are triggering this behaviour. So whereas it should really, the only small mouths it should be seeing are the mouths of its young, well, they've probably passed, actually, probably been eaten by foxes or something. So now it's in this position where it's set up to respond to this sign stimulus innately, but that sign stimulus isn't appearing in the normal position. So we have these minnows, they've got very small open mouths still, they come to the surface, they tend to feed, they open their mouths and it thinks, oh my word, I need to find some food, I need to feed them really quickly. And this is what it does. Yeah. So obviously a good example of a fixed action pattern in action. So Tinbergen in 51, he actually worked with male sticklebacks. If you don't fish, that is a kind of fish. All right. And he noticed that when there was, or especially male sticklebacks, when there was another male they encountered, because they're very territorial, they responded incredibly aggressively. Okay. But the sign stimulus, what was actually triggering this aggressive fixed action pattern, didn't actually seem to be the male itself. Okay, so it seemed to actually be the sight of a red underbelly. So what you had here, you can see on the right, there's a picture of what kind of sticklebacks kind of look like. It obviously is a picture, and he's got kind of some of the models he used. So he has a realistic model, which is a uniform colour. There's no red underbelly, and he's got all of these unrealistic models, which all have red underbellies. Okay, and he shows a real life male stickleback, one of these at a time, and notes its behaviour. Okay. So if the male stickleback, the kind of the model version, had a covered red underbelly, no aggression would occur. Yeah, this fixed action pattern wouldn't be triggered by the IRM, all right, because there isn't this sign stimulus, the sign stimulus being the red underbelly. But all of these things that don't look like males, these are ferociously attacked by the fish as much as they can, because they have this sign stimulus that they are innately kind of made to actually predict, yeah, and actually react to. All right. So good evidence here that there is such a thing as a sign stimulus and a kind of releasing mechanism, and then our fixed action pattern as a result. All right. So Lorenz in the 50s came up with this idea of a hydraulic model. So hydraulic pumps work by using hydraulic fluid. Yeah, you use this fluid to build the pressure, which then allows the forklift to raise its fork, or the car ramp to lift up, and things like this. Yeah, it exerts pressure in a different way. So they've applied it to this to kind of really kind of make it clear about why these fixed action patterns do happen when there is a sign stimulus, how they can also happen spontaneously, seemingly without a sign stimulus, or how sometimes even without, or even with, a sign stimulus, they don't seem to happen. So he actually argued that each fixed action pattern, each behaviour, has its own reserve of action-specific energy, ASE. So a dog barking will have its own reserve of dog barking energy, essentially, whereas a dog growling will have its own, again, reserve of dog barking energy. Yeah, a dog, I don't know, running around excitedly will have its own running around excitedly energy. Yeah, and this over time just builds naturally. It kind of increases just over time. Okay, and when the sign stimulus is recognised, it uses this energy to carry out the fixed action pattern. All right, but as a result of that, it uses up all of this ASE, all of this action-specific energy, and actually that behaviour, that fixed action pattern, can't be used again until it's been replenished. They normally have to wait an amount of time before they can do it again. So you might notice sometimes, especially, well, it's just been Halloween. Yeah, if you do have dogs, they may have been very, very excited, very, very barky when that first set of trick-or-treaters comes, the first strangers come to their territory. But over time, they become less and less fussed. Yeah. Now Lorenz would argue this isn't them becoming used to it, because obviously a few days later they're probably going to react in the same way. It's going to be barking. It's just that they're using up all of this action-specific energy, and they're not able to repeat this behaviour, this fixed action pattern, because they just don't have the energy to trigger it. Okay. So another ethological explanation of aggression comes from what we call ritualistic aggression. So a ritual is just kind of a behaviour that we do carry out. It's something that we do for its own sake almost. Okay. So often in animals, we see aggression not being used to help them fight, to be physically violent, but actually in a ritualized threat display. All right. Now these allow the different conspecifics to actually gauge each other, to face off against each other, yeah, to see how strong they are in relation to their competition before deciding whether or not if they're going to have a crack at it and try and kind of fight them physically, or if they think, oh no, he actually does look a bit stronger than me, I'm going to withdraw. All right. Obviously, the benefit of this is that to all animals in a kind of a natural environment, actual physical violence is very risky on both sides. Even if you win, you could sustain an injury that kills you. Yeah, so you really want to avoid violence at any cost. However, you do need to see off any threats to your area, your mates, your resources, etc. So a great example of this is male gorillas, silverback gorillas. Okay, if you don't know much about them, they are well, gorillas are kind of, they're running a harem. So there's one male who is dominant, and he will have access to all of the females there to mate with. None of the other males in the group are allowed to mate. Yeah. If you do want to mate, you have to challenge the silverback, and you have to show that you are bigger and angrier and stronger than he is. Like I say, actual violence puts both parties at risk. They both are likely to become injured. This can make them easier to die. So they want to avoid this. So what they do is they kind of they puff themselves up, they beat their chest, they hoot and they holler and they shout and they scream, and they try and do all of this before they even engage in any kind of violence themselves. Okay, this is so that they can show that they are stronger, that if they were to fight, that they would win, yeah, and the other person would be more likely to lose. So what tends to happen is the gorilla who can beat his chest the hardest and shout the loudest, he is deemed the victor, and the other one tends to slink off and skulk about a bit and try and get better at what he's doing. Okay, so that's an example of this kind of ritualized aggression. In humans, though, we still have these examples. Gardner and Hyder, they actually made a film in the 60s all about ritualized aggression of the Dani tribe in New Guinea. Now, this is someone from the Dani tribe on the right. Unfortunately, their film is a bit naff, to be honest. What they did was some good research. They obviously observed some really fantastic behaviour, so it's actually quite useful as a kind of a naturalistic observation. But the film they made is just poorly edited, poorly cut, and is just a bit rubbish. So I wouldn't recommend watching it, to be honest. But if you are really interested in anthropology, ask me and I'll give you the title of it. I'll find out again, and I'll give it to you as a point to start from. All right. But the Dani tribe of New Guinea, they actually engage in highly ritualised patterns of intergroup hostility. So essentially this means they engage in small-scale wars. Them and the tribes around them, they'll get together and they'll have these very kind of small-scale, very kind of short-lived, all-out conflict. All right. However, they're not really trying to kill each other or hurt each other that badly. It's a ritualized form of hostility. And what this allows them to do is essentially avoid the long-lasting feuds and wars that do plague other groups of tribes in some of the more remote locations in the world. Okay. So Fox in 78, they found that there was highly ritualized fighting. I say fighting here because it was essentially a collection of threat displays in the Gaelic-speaking Tory Island. Tory can be spelled other ways as well, depending if you're looking at the Gaelic spelling or the more anglicised spelling. But essentially it's off the coast of Ireland, and rather than actually engaging in fist fights or hitting each other with sticks or anything like that, what we tended to find was the people at Tory Island would actually have these kind of threat displays take place, and there'd be quite a complex system of kind of who was winning and who was losing. You find these different kind of pockets of strange ways to avoid actual violence occurring all the way throughout the world. But these are two really good examples, two ones we can use in our essays. Okay. So going back to animals, this is ethology, this is obviously the scientific study of animal behaviour. Lorenz said we should look at wolves and doves as two kind of antitheses and examples. Okay, so in 52, again, it's Lorenz again, it's a different date again, so make sure you're not getting confused between them all. Alright, he noted that while wolves had evolved powerful weapons to make them better hunters and killers, yeah, so they've got sharp teeth, they've got incredibly strong jaws, they are having claws as well, which they can obviously rend flesh with and all these different kind of things. They have these tools that they're equipped with made for killing that actually other non-hunting kind of species, they don't have any of these natural weapons. Okay, so there is an issue with wolves that actually, if they do engage in aggression with each other, yeah, so within conspecifics, that actually they're going to kill each other, yeah, and that kind of undoes the whole point of this kind of ritualized aggression. Right. Whereas things like doves, who aren't hunters, they don't have these kind of inbuilt weapons. Yeah, they actually aren't having the same risk. Okay, and he actually said, well, wolves don't tend to be killing each other, so there must be some instinctive inhibition, yeah, to prevent them from using these weapons against each other. So if you've noticed kind of dogs fighting, obviously dogs is kind of modern day wolves. If you watch many nature documentaries, you've probably noticed that when wolves fight, the loser, he lies on the floor, he bares his throat, he bares his stomach. It will often kind of lick the jowls of the dominant animal, and kind of shows that, look, I'm losing, I've lost, you win, don't kill me. Yeah. So really kind of think about this. Actually, if you're facing a foe with these massive teeth that are built for tearing flesh, the last thing you really want to do, especially if you're losing, is bare your neck. Yeah. But what tends to happen is a wolf will bare its neck, it will bare its belly, and suddenly the fight stops. Yeah, that is it admitting it has lost. And Lorenz says, well, they're animals, they don't have the kind of complex social structure and hierarchies that we'd expect to see them have this realization. So actually it must be instinctive, it must be an innate actual drive. So it prevents this dominant animal from continuing the fight. Yeah, just kind of seeing them bare their neck. This is almost another sign stimulus. Yeah, which would lead to the innate releasing mechanism, the IRM, that will lead to them stopping fighting. Yeah, so it almost undoes the fixed action pattern of aggression. Okay, but remember, this is them fighting and killing conspecifics, members of their same species. Now, this is really important you know that term. So like I've already said, our non-hunting species, people like doves, things like that, they don't have weapons. They can't kill each other very easily or anything else very easily because they don't need to. That's not how they've been feeding them. Okay, but it also means they have no inhibitions against hurting their own kind. They are more than happy if they do fight to really fight. Okay, but they don't need to have anything that kind of is instinctively stopping them from killing each other, because when doves fight, the loser just flies away. It zooms off. Yeah, it doesn't need to worry about its competitor from following it and trying to attack it because it doesn't have weapons. Yeah, so they just leave. Much easier. Okay. Now, Lorenz were actually saying that humans were quite similar to doves, and not in a literal sense, but more in the fact that we don't have our own natural weapons. Yeah, so therefore we don't have an instinctive inhibition against killing other people, and this explains why we are aggressive towards others, and why we don't tend to stop and kind of calm down if someone kind of says I am losing. We do tend to kill them. Yeah, well, not us particularly, hopefully. And other researchers have actually noted that actually our technology, our science, has so far outstripped our evolution, our ethology, that it's become really worrying. Because rather than just having our own natural weapons like sharp teeth or big claws or something, we've developed things like guns. We've developed things like nuclear weapons, which means that we have these incredibly more destructive, more powerful weapons that can do far more damage, and nothing instinctive to say don't use them on anyone like you. Okay, so this is actually quite worrying. So next lesson, we're going to be having a brief recap of this, make sure we get it, answering any questions. We're going to be looking at some of the evaluation of this kind of fixed action pattern, this instinctive view of aggression, and we're going to be addressing it like that. Okay, so I'll speak to you soon.